Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anna Wallner. I have been reporter at the Austrian newspaper Die Presse for almost 20 years. Recently, I'm head of the opinion desk and of the audio section of our paper. I'm also one of the hosts of our daily podcast, Was wichtig ist. It's my pleasure to welcome you all at the Wittgenstein Centre Conference 2024 for the final round of this first day. And I will be guiding you through the discussion this afternoon alongside our 5 distinguished guests. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. And maybe you can also, I don't know, warm it up with a warm applause for them. I think I don't tell you a big secret when I say that the global fertility market is a big business and is projected to double over the next 10 years. On a human level, it is a beacon of hope to so many at a time when fertility rates are at an all-time low in the developed world. From a medical perspective, the field of reproductive technology is rapidly evolving, and I guess we will be hearing about some of these innovations later on. However, this potential to have more control over who, how, when, and with whom we create life also makes this topic extremely political sensitive. Issues such as reproductive rights, privacy, and bodily integrity require us to understand and reconsider so much more than just the biological implications that delayed reproduction could have on a society. And I guess in the current political tense situation with buzzwords like your body, my choice, it seems especially fitting that we have gathered international experts from different fields to offer different perspectives here at this conference in Vienna and at today's panel discussion here. I just want to say that you are invited to discuss and to ask questions later on when we will take some questions from the audience. But first, I would like you to meet the experts here with me. Professor Jacky Boivin already kicked off the conference this morning with her keynote about fertility education. She is professor of health psychology and women's health at Cardiff University. And as a trained scientist practitioner, a core feature of her work has been to use research to develop, evaluate, and implement diverse tools to support people trying to make babies, as you write it down in your own bio, as well as the stakeholders involved. Anna Rotkirch, on the right side of the whole panel, is research professor and director of the Population Research Institute at the Family Federation of Finland. As a sociologist, her topics of specialization include the family, fertility, grandparenting, and friendship. And in her research, she aims to combine social and biological approaches regarding childbearing behavior and on couple relations in older age. Marlene Hager is sitting here next to us, and she has probably had the shortest journey today, or second shortest from all of us. She's a practicing doctor at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. You have to help me. Gynecology at the Medical University Vienna, and specializing in gynecological endocrinology and reproductive medicine. I'm also joined by a lecturer and postgraduate research director in global health and social medicine at King's College London, Lucy van der Wiel. Her research focuses on the introduction of new reproductive technologies and how these give insight into broader developments within the IVF sector, including the datafication of reproduction and the financialization of fertility. And last but not least, I would also like to welcome the only male participant on our panel today, and also a fellow Austrian, Erich Griessler. As a senior researcher at the IHS, his topics of interest span public engagement in research and innovation policy, the political regulation of assisted reproductive technologies, and responsible research and innovation. We are very happy to have you all here, and you can see it's an incredibly diverse group of experts, speakers today, who will offer their insights now. Erich, I want to start, as you're the only male, I want to start with you. No, I thought that's okay to turn it up. I feel like we are to consider.
Total wrong question for me. Cannot answer. As I said, I came totally unprepared. I came with...
it's too loud.
Closer? Closer?
Yes,
better?
I think you all
Okay.
have to get...
As I told you, I came totally unprepared and came already in the morning just to listen what you have been doing and what you are doing since I'm a sociologist. I'm not a demograph like you are. So I listened to you, and what I found very interesting in your presentation was that all of you had this kind of bird-eye perspective very much, and you had a very quantitative perspective on infertility. So I'm not focusing so much on infertility. I'm totally not on quantitative measures. I'm totally a qualitative person, and I'm a sociologist. So I am not so much into like the psychologists today said, okay, how you're looking at individual, here you are. You are looking at individual people. I'm more interested in structures and how they affect and what the effects are. And that is what my research was about. So when I started to look into assisted reproductive technologies, that was a very long time ago, that was in the 1980s when I was a student of sociology, I went to a conference which then was still called Soziologentag in Germany. And there was a very inspiring sociologist, Beck-Gernsheim, and she said, you know, these assisted reproductive technologies, which were still in the very infancy at the time, they are going to change totally what reproduction is about and how we understand family, relationship, how we understand ourselves, how we understand parenting. And this is something which totally came true. So if you ask this question, which is no longer there, should we worry about something? I wouldn't say we shouldn't worry about something, but we should discuss it. And that's something which never really happened with assisted reproductive technologies for various reasons. So I think we don't have to worry about the consequences of technology because we are already in it.
So what should we worry about then, from your perspective?
We should worry about that we are unable to see the consequences of when we invent technologies, and that's not only limited to assisted reproductive technologies. Think about digitalization, think about AI. We are in the midst of technological developments and still are thinking of, oh, every technology is a little bit like a knife, you know? It depends how you use it. But actually, it's not like a knife. It's totally changing us. And this is something we should discuss. And I'm worried about that we don't have the culture and we don't have the practice and we don't have the bodies to discuss in a meaningful manner these very important questions. And also what I'm worried about is that I very often am the only man. So yesterday I was at a meeting about surrogacy. Again, I was the only man. So I think more men should worry about this.
Do you have an idea why there are less men than women in this field?
It's in Austria, for instance, I'm writing an article about social freezing. And it's about Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I'm the only Austrian who is handing in something. So it's really, to talk about these questions is really a niche. It's a niche in research, and it's a niche in society.
Anna, I think, I hope I got it right with you, but I saw that in your fertility report, you advocate for increased fertility awareness. And that's also something that comes together with that what Erich says. He said, we don't have the practice, we don't talk about the problems that brings late parenthood with us and all the technology that comes around. So do you think, and what should we do to encourage people to start their family planning earlier, or to even think more about it, what it means?
Yes, to continue on what Erich said, I think the situation is changing so rapidly in infertility behavior that even during the last 4 years, the global development, and of course we all know here it varies by, there are many contextual factors, yet what we now see for now is that fertility is declining much faster than anybody expected. Means that, yes, we need a discussion. For instance, this idea of too many people, since we all know that currently fewer and fewer babies are being born every year, and population growth is driven by hopefully longer life expectancy, basically, that changes the whole approach to too many people. That's saying, like, people should live shorter lives in order for us to have fewer people. There are many other problems with this, but I mean, it's very interesting to see that in the media discussion, we have arguments which in a way understandably reflect the situation 20 or 30 years ago. So currently, the whole humanity is probably below replacement level, and we don't know how the trends will develop. So first of all, I think we should really have better data, more research, and take time to see what's happening. Then if I go to my own society, Finland, we are the third most aged population, and we now have a very low fertility, and we now have a really healthy, broad discussion on how we could empower people to have the numbers of children they say they want. And that's I'm glad about. But kind of giving the whole picture, it's a very, very small scene.
Jacky, what is your perspective on this discussion? Should we educate people more? How can we do it? And where should we put our emphasis on in this?
That's the million-dollar question. Well, as I spoke this morning, there are many potential pathways to education. You can start with educating young people, but if you do that, then you have to make sure that you give the right kind of knowledge. Otherwise, it produces anxiety or feelings of susceptibility to a disease that they're very unlikely to achieve given how the world is. You can also work more towards deliberation tools that help people make the decisions. So when you think of models of shared decision-making, there's always two components. One is giving people information, and then they have all the information about the options, the attributes of these options, and then you have to help them to deliberate, which is basically where they go, okay, well, I really like attribute A, this is really important to me, or I don't like this attribute, I really don't want that to happen, and then you can help them to make decisions about that. But in the context of fertility, it's quite complex to come up with a single thing that's going to solve all the questions that people have. And we also have a lot of different options. And on top of that, most people partner, they prefer to have children with a partner, although solo parenthood is growing, and co-parenting, where you have 3 friends having a child together, is also growing. Back to the remark about men and the absence of men, I had a PhD student who worked 3 years to answer the question, why are men not represented in fertility research? And if you look at many studies in fertility, psychological aspects, qualitative, quantitative, there are always many, many more women than there are men. I've shown you some data earlier. There are 3 times as many women going to fertility assessment clinics as there were men. And after 3 years, the answer was, well, multiple factors. Men exclude themselves from the world of fertility. They see it as a female thing. men are excluded from the world of childbearing as well, because they're perceived to not be interested in it. And then there's also how we organize our services, which are orientated, reproductive services orientated more towards women. So in answer to your question, we need to have many solutions that tackle many of the problems that we have. But it seems a lot is around shared decision-making, supporting people to make the decisions and finding the right way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Marlene, I would like to bring up the practical side of your work. Today, IVF is a common way to conceive, but could you briefly talk us through your everyday life at the Medical University? What are the challenges you face? The questions that come up also when people come to you?
I mean, first, I have the impression that in the last few years, people tend to be much more informed about everything. Also, they sometimes come with already done hormone levels, stuff like that, and they put it in front of you and they're like, how long can I be fertile? And you're like, okay, I cannot tell you with one hormone test. But that's something that kind of has evolved in the last few years, that a lot of people are interested in their fertility and they want to know how long they can conceive. And I also have the impression that this is a very female topic. So I mean, I'm a gynecologist, so of course I don't see a lot of men. But I have the feeling that in our fertility clinic, we always have a lot of women just wanting to know. They do not already want to have a baby necessarily, but they sometimes just want to know. So that's something that has evolved in the last few years. And from a technical point of view, I mean, we can offer from just a hormone stimulation and conceiving at home to intrauterine insemination, where you just prepare the sperm, bring it into the uterine cavity, and then the IVF, which has kind of two ways. One is the IVF, where you put the egg cell and the sperm cell in one dish and wait for them to fertilize, and the ICSI, which is the intracytoplasmatical sperm injection, where you put the sperm into the egg. Mm-hmm. So you assist the sperm to get into the egg, but the end result is the same.
But it's also when we look at, especially in this in this case, to Austria, mm-hmm. It's also a question of costs, of the costs mm-hmm. that are involved, and the question who can or cannot receive this support. How do you observe the Austrian situation on that? And because with that comes also a question of inequality again, who mm-hmm. is able to get the help? Mm-hmm.
So the governmental help in Austria you can get if you are below 40 as a woman and below 50 as a man. And you have to be in a partnership. So not exactly a partnership, but a confirmed partnership. So you have to be married, or you need a Notariatsakt. I don't even know how to say this in English. It's a excuse me?
Civil partnership.
Yeah, it's something very special for Austria. Yeah, maybe you can call it civil partnership. Closest. Yes, closest. Yeah, and you have to be European or have long. You have to be allowed to be here for long enough to get the funds.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just because we have someone from Finland here. How is that in Finland? How easy is it to get some funding or support from the state?
Yes, I actually saw there's some index rating all the ART treatments, and Finland was quite on top there. So we allow single women to have treatment, which then also includes same-sex female couples. Our age limits are, I think, a bit lower than in Denmark, for instance. But
lower than in
but basically, and then we have quite, I think it's up to 3 or 4 cycles, quite inexpensively provided by the state. So basically, there's quite good access to fertility treatments compared to many other European countries.
Lucy, I would like to come to you. How you say, how can we navigate these new reproductive options and still give all those involved legal rights and agency also?
You ask us some big questions right there. How can we all navigate the options and make sure people can access them? Well, I think there's so many levels to whether you're talking about regulation, economics, and societal prejudices and people's normativities that play into that question. One thing that I've noticed from my discussions being here today is that there's quite a few restrictions in Austria. In my field, in social egg freezing, it's not allowed here. And also the treatment of single women. She just mentioned the necessity for partnerships. I feel like, you know, if we're talking about people having reproductive agency, people having reproductive freedom, having sort of basic access to treatment and having the opportunity to make those decisions for themselves rather than the state limiting that is a big part. But at the same time, we see that a lot of fertility treatment and ideas about fertility are no longer limited to one state. People can obviously travel, but also people are so connected online that they know how people think about treatments elsewhere, that they know that they can go elsewhere, but also that they know what they're missing. So I think with a lot of fertility treatments, while it's not a knife, there's the question of what kind of reproductive politics is expressed through their usage and through their regulation. And I feel like with, for example, egg freezing or other types of assisted reproduction, there are real problems with limiting the access, and there's real problems with having complete freedom around that through the issues of commercialization and financialization that really play a big role as well. And so when we talk about solutions like being more educated, having more awareness, and maybe discussing things with each other as an academic community, I also feel like we shouldn't be naive about the operations of power in the world and really need to, there's a real need to be very explicit and to highlight what power relations are at play in either allowing or disallowing people's access to technologies, but also in encouraging and disencouraging certain treatments rather than others in keeping with the drivers of capital.
Erich, I would like to ask you if you want to answer on this remark of Lucy, because you said before we don't know enough. We don't have the practice, and then we also hear about this inequality between countries and between methods that are available and are allowed in some countries and in others not.
No, actually, I don't want to answer to Lucy. I think I want to enter into a discussion with you, because I think when you say, okay, on the one hand, it's a problem if we limit the access. On the other hand, it's also a problem if we don't have any limitation to access. So there must be some kind of norms and values which determine whether we say this should be done, this should not be done. And this can only be done by having a discussion about what kind of values are at place and what should we allow and what should we not allow. And the interesting thing is, when you look comparatively across Europe, you have very different regulations of art, very different regulations of art. And if you look particularly to the UK and Austria, it seems like to be a totally different world. And then the question is, okay, can we have a civilized discussion about what are our values on which our regulations are based? And I think this is interesting, because you already said there are powers in working when there is limitation, but there are also powers working when there is total freedom. So, and somebody said today, and I think it was you, it's $1 million mark, it's $1 billion, yeah. So it's a big market. So what are the powers in play here, and how can we regulate it? And I think we should regulate it, but in a meaningful way, and we should base our regulations on discussions which kind of values do we want to support and which we don't.
Can I respond?
Of course.
Yeah, so I think with a lot of, and I don't know if the question is values, but we can use values for the moment, but I feel like a lot of the regulations are focused on the level of reproductive freedom that individuals have, and often these individuals are women. And so when we look at the expression of regulations or of values in terms of limiting the choices that women can make in relation to their own bodies, in relation to reproductive technologies, I feel like that is not necessarily solved by looking at those regulations. I feel like the issues that come with letting go of those regulations and looking at what might happen if you have a much more commercialized or financialized industry requires a regulation of the companies and of the investors rather than a regulation of the patients and the choices that are available to them. So I would look at what are the things that can be done at a national level, at a European level, at a global level, to ensure that the kinds of markets that emerge or that exist are in line with the kinds of values that we would like to have, whether they be, for example, more equality, more justice, less exploitation, rather than saying values about age limits, or you have to be in a heterosexual relationship, or you have to be a certain social background in order to access these treatments. So we have to have a good idea of what the problems are in order to find the right solutions, rather than to operate from a sense of normativity that may not be just for everyone involved.
I think Anna also wanted to say something. You can just go first, and then Anna. Yeah.
Equality and justice are also values.
But you have to speak to
equality
the
and justice are also values.
Great.
I didn't understand this, sorry.
Yeah. No, I just want to say that I kind of see this, the fertility treatments as a very double-edged sword. And if we look at the population level, there are currently kind of more drawbacks from the unwarranted hope people put into them, and the media and many politicians kind of also promote, compared to their actual efficacy. So I'm all for access to infertility treatments for those who need them, absolutely, within ethical limits. But we just had a study from Finland done by the Institute of Health and Welfare, big population level study. Of all Finns who had experienced infertility in their lives, only 60% had sought treatment, and of those who had treatment, only half had had a baby from treatments. So that's 30% of all people facing infertility, and most who face infertility do it due to delayed postponing the event to have a child. So I think the policy effect should be not so much on the medical solutions as to the preventive solutions, in line with what Jacky was saying in her plenary. And I think this is very important also in the general discussion, that we shouldn't promote the commercial interests and we shouldn't raise unrealistic hopes.
Jacky, I would like to ask you also something from the experiences you made. Maybe you can elaborate on the journey people in your practice go through. Why do they decide to? I mean, we know why they do it, of course, but how do you think could you try to learn them or to teach them to be more? I don't know, to start start the whole process earlier.
You mean to speed them up a bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or no, not to speed them up, not to make them aware that it's not a thing, because we have the medical and technological solutions, that it's a good idea or the best idea to wait so long.
It's an incredibly difficult journey to do that, because there are competing other goals that people want to achieve, and so as in most psychological things, you'd have to set up a trade-off so you could have win-win. You could have your cake and eat it at the same time, and it's quite difficult. And as you pointed out, by the time people actually come to the clinic, they're already in their mid-30s. They're already, and they're still coming just to find out if they can postpone a little bit longer.
And they are maybe much more informed than, as you said before, 30 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
They know already a lot,
Yeah, they know a lot. They, you know, you can, well, I don't know what it's like in Austria, but certainly in the UK, you can go down to the local apotheke and get, you know, a test for sperm, a test for AMH, or some related tests like that, or you can go to fertility clinic for a workup to find out how fertile you think you are right now. But I do want to say something here around this idea that the companies and the clinics are taking advantage of very vulnerable people. In a way, I don't know that everyone is as vulnerable as we make them out. They are informed public. I think the issue of why they give in to perhaps commercial assets is because to some extent they're not sure about their choice. And so you want to cover everything. You have when you have uncertainties, you try to put in as many options and preserve as many options as you can. And I think maybe that's one of the things that allows us to linger and kick the can down the field and, you know, take longer and longer. Perhaps we need to think about that a bit more.
Yes, please.
From my perspective, I feel the need to say that all this social freezing discussion is a discussion that affects young women who have their careers, who invested their whole lives in their careers, and then they are 30 and they are in front of this question, of this big question: do I want to have a family, or do I not want to have a family? Or maybe do I want to have a family but later? And I have not seen a single woman in my life who is 30 and told me, I would like to wait until I'm 50. Nobody does that. No. We are facing young women who want to postpone for a few years. They do not want to, like we talk about old mothership and a woman in her 40, like 38 to 42, that's not old. You know what I mean? So we're not postponing until we're 50 or 55. I mean, of course, there are women who do that, and it's also not a bad thing, but I don't think that this is gonna explode. Like, I don't think that a lot of women will do that.
But the fun thing is, for me, when you talk about that, about this female perspective of the whole topic with the education and the career world, we have here different panelists who come from different countries. We have Finland, we have UK, we have Austria, and we see that in these countries, the whole perspective on this topic is so different, because we know from the Scandinavian countries, the whole work life and partnership, like the participation of men or fathers in the family life is much higher than in Austria, for example. But still, we see it's. And then there's also a different legal situation in different countries. But on the bottom line, it seems to be the same in all, not totally the same, but more or less the same in all the countries. Isn't that interesting?
It definitely is, and also the approach is a different one in so many different countries, because when I worked in the USA, people were like, how you don't have social egg freezing, like what? And I'm like, yeah, it's illegal in Austria. And they're like, why? So they couldn't even understand why we are not allowed to make our own decisions if it's about our own fertility. And this gives me a little bit of, I would say, emotional rage, because I have so many young women as patients, and they always ask me, why am I not allowed to like have my fertility for a little bit longer? And I'm like,
I can tell.
I don't know.
Yeah, please.
Can I ask you a question? Because this is, I think, of the crux of the matter to some extent. Being a Canadian, you know, I have a lot of exposure to the Americans and the American systems and so on. And, you know, one of the things is that the environment has an influence on what you think is the option set. So, of course, the Americans have a very privatized system of health. Of course, they're going to be offering these options, and of course, they're aggressively pushed. Even companies pay now for egg freezing, as you know. So when these people remark they're incredulous, what? You don't have egg freezing? Is that a reflection of their reproductive choice within themselves, or is that a reflection of the social norms that they're exposed to, which are partly driven by these commercial determinants? I mean, this is a question I ask myself. Am I a puppet or not, you know?
I think we all are, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a reflection of 12 years education, because in the medical system you have this education, you cannot even shorten it. You know what I mean? So you have this 6 years medical school, then 6 years
further training.
No, basic training. That's what I wanted to say. Basic training. So, in order to do your specialist training, your residency, that's what it's called. And then after that, you have 3 or 4 or 5 years of fellowship, and then you are a specialist in your field. And then they all are like 35 to 40. And before that, you cannot specialize, because you have all this clinical work and all this. Beside the clinical work, you also are required to do science. So you have so many things to do. You don't have time to build a family in these years. And this is where also the biological inequality comes up, because we all know that it's easy for men to father a child at 43, but we know that it's not so easy to conceive with your own eggs at 43. So that's where the inequality comes in, and I know the inequality is biologic and we cannot do anything about it, but on the other hand, can't we?
Yeah. But I think your question was not really answered, but it's a hard question, and the answer to it is not the easiest one. But Anna also wanted to say something.
Thank you. I think you put it really well, Marlene. Can we and should we? Also, you earlier said a woman is not old when she's 38 to 42, but then, I mean, reproductively speaking, she is old. So she's not old in many other ways, but yeah. I think this is the key question. Should female biology adjust to our social lifestyle? And should we put money and invasive procedures with very uncertain outcomes? I mean, the success rates of egg freezing, as I understood, are not great. Or should we have a society where women and men who want children can have them when it's biologically optimal to have them, and can combine studies and work and kind of be more family friendly? And I would really like to see the latter kind of society. And I think we had it in the Nordics, but then something happened. But kind of 15 years ago, fertility rates were fine. We didn't have egg freezing. We don't have much social egg freezing at all either now, even. So
just wait.
Yeah. Indeed, I said we had it all, and it's going.
But the fertility rate went down as well. That's what you wanted to say.
Yeah, fertility collapsed and childlessness is rising. But I mean, why can't we discuss why is it so that a woman should become a mother when she's past her prime years in many ways, also reproductively? Why isn't that the kind of ultimate neoliberal, patriarchal, capitalist view on of women?
Wanted to say something before? Please, Erich.
I totally second this. For me, it was amazing in the discussion in the morning that it was always about individual choice, blah, 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 but not so much about social structures which enable people to make these choices. And I think I'm a sociologist.
That's what she just said.
I just said I'm a psychologist.
Yeah, so with the same stamina like you said, I'm a psychologist.
Yeah.
So I'm a sociologist, and I think structures are much more important than these individual choices. And I second that. What I wrote is, I mean, I studied when you had to do two things. You had to do two disciplines. I studied history and sociology. And for me, when somebody, I don't know who said, my fertility, that's an interesting expression, because you wouldn't say that, I think, 100 years ago. there is no such a thing as my fertility. The discussion at the very beginning of IVF in Austria and in many countries was the question, is this actually something humans are allowed to do? And so we moved in these 40, 50 years, we moved from this idea, is it possible? Is it something which humans should do? To the question of, okay, we can do it, but only in very limited areas where there is cure because of infertility. And then we moved on into equality in terms of who should get access. As many people should get access to IVF treatment as possible. And then we have this neoliberal model where we think, okay, and it's not only about getting children. It's also about prenatal diagnostics. It's about PGD.
That's true. Yeah.
It's about I'm teaching a course at the University of Vienna. Yesterday I had on Politikfeldanalyse, Reproduktionsmedizin. So we are discussing differences between different countries, and I was amazed that there was so little awareness with my students that it might be problematic to do some kind of genetic editing on children. So it's not only that we talk about this, we really talk about what are we doing, what are we allowed to do, in what power constellations are we doing it, who is profiting from. You brought this picture today of Elon Musk and Putin. So where are we going? When I was a 10-year-old child, I had measles, and I lay in bed and I listened to Aldous Huxley. And to unbottled children was totally inconceivable. You also showed the artificial womb. Yeah. So where are we going? What are we discussing? My reproduction, just the last sentence. My fertility, yes. But what does it mean in terms of society? What kind of society are we creating? And what kind of choices will there be if this is normal?
I would like to ask Lucy if you also think that we don't talk enough about the options there are and what are the legal implications on that, or also the genetic or whatever medical implications. Do you see it the same?
About other technologies?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, just briefly following up on what was just said, I think we probably are all in agreement that we should have societies that offer provisions for people to have children in a way that supports them and supports the parents and the children, to combine that if they wish to with wage labor. And then I also wonder if the restriction on making technologies available to people is necessarily an anti-neoliberal move. Because I think if we want to curtail the sort of individualist, neoliberalist solution thinking, as opposed to the more structural approaches to, creating more gender inequality, whether the limitation of, say, access to reproductive technologies by age or partnership status or gender is going against that, I think that is looking at a different issue. But what you were asking is about the other technologies. So it is to do with, to a degree, Elon Musk. It is to do with looking at what kind of technologies are currently being developed and how are they funded by whom. And what we see is that there's a lot of the venture capital money that's going into startups that are looking at bio-innovations for reproduction, including IVG, including many of the digital applications, for example, looking at AI systems to select embryos or to select gametes. They are funded in a private way. So we see not only a shift from more public healthcare to private and financialized healthcare, but also a shift from these technologies being developed in academic research labs to them being developed in VC and venture capital-backed startup companies. And those startup companies often operate with a different set of rationalities. They have different timelines that they need to meet in order to get to the next funding cycle. They have to tell a different story in order to convey funders that they are worth investing in. And they have to paint a picture of a future which is often, which has to combine both the imperatives of the funding and a kind of utopian idea of what fertility will look like in the future. And so I think when we ask this question about the future of reproduction, we have to look at what is in the pipeline now, but also not just the technologies, but what kind of pipelines are there? And so I've just been to a symposium in Geneva about IVG, about creating eggs and sperm out of stem cells. And I was speaking with a couple of people who work in the academic labs, and they were talking about how the way they do their research has really changed because the startup companies are around as well. And they really have a very different way of sharing knowledge or keeping knowledge to themselves for IP purposes. They have different ways of creating hope with the public in order to convey a compelling story versus people being quite guarded because they value more that they are reliable rather than not meeting those expectations. So I think the shifts that we see in how we organize clinical care as well as organizing reproductive innovation is something that we really need to look at if we look at these questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for now. I would like to open the floor now to you, to the audience. And if you have questions, please introduce yourself and also ask your question directly to the expert you want to have the answer from. And here's a woman with a microphone.
Hi, I'm Melinda Mills from Oxford. I don't know who I want to direct this to. Maybe everybody.
You can also leave it open.
So I've been at genetic and medical conferences with exactly this title about aging parents and technological solutions. And they've covered entirely different topics, which is fascinating in itself. And I think Erich, the sociologist, actually was the one that brought up the points they raised. So it wasn't about embryo selection, but it was about CRISPR and Cas9. So that's different, right? So it's gene editing. And really the very promising things to help largely at the moment, like male infertility issues and how useful that can be and how it might actually influence ART, for example, or put it out of business in some ways. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is about de novo mutations, where so there's a study 10 years ago in Science where they've looked at multiple generations and they connect older parents, and specifically older men, with these de novo mutations, so changes in the DNA sequencing, which is associated with ADHD, autism, and many things. So a lot of the discussions about older parents there is related to genetic mutations, which have been found. It's not, and it's been replicated. And then the other thing is about the rights of the child, which I haven't really heard too much about either in terms of anonymous donors and when you start editing things. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to hear that it's a very parallel discussion. So I don't know who wants to take that on.
Shall I?
Yeah, of course.
Well, in some ways, there's a replication problem, and that's why there's the sperm quality is decreasing over time. And obviously in men. So there are solutions that are orientated towards solving that problem. And we do know that there's a lot of DNA fragmentation as men age, and that causes associations with various kinds of disorders when they try to conceive. But I guess the point of what you're saying in a way is that a lot of these technologies always originally get developed because they're trying to solve a medical problem, but then somehow their use expands. Like ICSI used to be a kind of IVF that was only given if there was a male factor problem, if there was a problem with the sperm, but now it's pretty much given to everybody, and in some countries it's become the only thing that's given. IVF used to be only for tubal disorders, but now anybody can have it. And so now you have to think in the future of reproduction, they're developing the artificial womb, which is apparently to help premature babies, but you can be sure that that use is going to be very expanded shortly thereafter, and it could be that the artificial womb is there to support the synthetic egg and sperm or synthetic embryos or whatever else the future occurs. So I guess my thinking when you made those comments was about how do you stop the progress of technology? How is it shaped by our social norms, like you're referring to? To what extent do our values impact the progression of this and the change? You can see here in Austria, the values are no egg freezing and there's no egg freezing. But in other countries, it's going to be a different story. But eventually, it seems like we all harmonize or merge somehow.
Is there someone else who wants to say something to the remark of the...
Well, just that there are some technologies such as SCNT, like cloning, that they've had a global moratorium for quite a long time. So it is possible to have, say, a lab-based discovery or a lab-based progression, and then agree at a global level not to do it. I don't know how long that agreement continues, but for the time being, I mean, since we had Dolly the sheep, it's been quite a long time, and still, 96. As far as I'm aware, no cloned humans. So it could be that CRISPR-Cas9 or something like that could, you know, to a degree would have similar moratoria, including artificial wombs and so on. So there is a degree of control that we do have over it. But I think it's such an important point about the expansion of the applications of the technologies. Once they are clinically applied, it's very hard not to have the drivers to expand the potential populations for them.
Yeah, and that is often very commercially determined.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just one sentence.
I thought that everyone is...
I mean, this is also related to what science can do and what science should do and how science operates and what the dynamics of science are and what the drivers of individual scientific careers are. So I think this is a difficult discussion.
Mm-hmm, of course. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. Start with the man here.
Thanks for fascinating discussion. When I hear about artificial wombs, I just think, don't tell the government of Korea, because they want to give up on their women and find new ways of creating babies. But I want to push the discussion a little bit back to the late age at childbearing, because I see an interesting tension in the discussion between this neoliberal kind of criticism of technology, where the attitude is, let's create society which allows people to become parents at a kind of normal biological age. But at the same time, we know that many people will not succeed, even if conditions are perfect. Should we be, now we have the tools to do it, should we be providing conditions for people who want to be parents when they're, let's say, in their late 40s, early 50s, to do so, or is that a red line and we shouldn't? And do you expect that in our lifetimes, in the next 10, 20 years, motherhood among women in their 50s would be just absolutely normal thing, very widespread, or not?
Do you have someone you want to direct the question, or
whoever
can we
wants,
choose?
No, I mean whoever wants to.
Who wants to answer?
Yeah. If I don't have an answer, but maybe a question back. It depends on how. I mean, for instance, I think surrogacy is in many ways very problematic and increases inequalities among women. But I mean, that's one way. If we find a way to somehow really prevent ovarian aging through, cheap and non-invasive and no side effect means, that's a totally other thing. But currently, also the success of fertility treatments depends on female age, really largely. I mean, in that sense, I don't think the age limits are due to evil politicians. It's because the success rates are so low.
Okay, Lucy, you said
but I don't know. It's more of a question, and you know more about this than I do.
It is an interesting question. If we theoretically said there is a treatment that women could conceive until they're 60, then because you're right, at the moment it's a hypothetical question, because you can do it to an extent with donor eggs, donor embryos, but it's such a limited set of options at the moment. But if those options did exist, then we really get to the question of to what extent the sort of normative limits that we have to female reproductive aging, to what extent are they biologically motivated or are they socially motivated? And if we have a social acceptance that men in their 50s can become fathers, would we say that if women in their 50s could become mothers in ways that are, fairly safe and fairly accessible, would we have a problem with that? And if so, what does that tell us about the gender politics of aging and the different ways in which we conceive motherhood and fatherhood? And so I think that would be an interesting discussion to have with all of you and with this group. But the current reality is so different from that social norm is sort of almost hidden underneath the biological norm because it's not accessible.
Okay.
In fact, it would be accessible if we would do it, but in most countries it's forbidden. So, we don't put a donor egg into a 60-year-old woman because it's just not done in most of the countries. And also, I think from my perspective, most of our patients are well aware that when you're 60, your body is not capable of a pregnancy anymore. So we would have more problems with preeclampsia, hypertension, gestational diabetes, stuff like that. So I still don't think that this is going to be a big problem, because I think nobody will, or no woman will, or there are always single women who want things, and always single men who want to be fathers when they're 90. I don't know, but most of the women, and that's what we have to discuss, I guess, is most of the women are well aware that the reproductive phase is over somewhere in your 40s.
And I think, when you look at the extreme cases that do exist of women having very late reproductions, that's often a sign of societies in which reproduction is valued so highly that even at the expense of women's health or the children's health, that is upheld as the thing that gives them social status. So even if there is that availability, it's often from a very, what we could say oppressive standpoint. But it is, I do think it's interesting to tease out to what extent this is about medical risk and to what extent it is about age norms. Because you could say, okay, there's an increase of preeclampsia and of other kinds of risks associated with age, but then would you apply the same norms to somebody, for example, who has recovered from a serious disease, also has an increased risk of pregnancy, but is 30 years old, for example? And so we have to sort of tease apart where these norms related to aging and where they're related to medical risk.
Okay, I would like to take the next question here.
Two questions, but I'll keep them short. One is technological and one is sociological. And the technological one is a specific technology in mind that something like stem cells, which could be made into gametes, or technology that would preserve more of the eggs than a woman has than the 400 or so currently which are there. So I mean, that's a large part of the infertility after 40 is the egg supply, not just a biological status other than that. So I'm curious. I don't think we have to talk about 60 as an age, but maybe people. I'm thinking of the graph earlier we saw where it's now normal to want to achieve a certain number of things in your life before you have a family, and most of those things you are achieving by the time you're in your late 30s. So we're really talking just about another 10 years of fertility that would allow everyone to reach the ideal that they have. So I'm curious, what do you think about those technologies, which maybe are a little further afield, but what impact those might have? And the sociological question is just about whether or not you see a dialogue between generations where younger women who are entering the reproductive ages are looking at the experiences of their parents' generation and making decisions of their own, maybe sometimes in contrast. And specifically have in mind, whether or not women who are entering reproductive ages now are looking at the questions that are going on in the current generations of women who are exiting the reproductive ages. And maybe, to Anna and others' points, make decisions to have children earlier, even if it means, some compromises in their work life, but maybe they won't have to make them if they're made it at a large enough scale that society will have to accommodate the desires of those women.
Let's start with the sociological question, and maybe Erich.
I don't know whether I can answer it, but there were two interesting, there were only interesting presentations today, but one presentation,
you have to speak
one presentation referred to, I guess, this was, and then we had this discussion about the boomer generation, the post-work generation. So we had this distinction between generations, which have different experiences, and I think they also have different norms. So I am, because of that, I think I am not so, I'm not so positive or not so optimistic about this transgenerational discussion, because what I have seen developing in the last 40 years, I could see this develop, and I could see how this changed, and I could see how, I think nothing is so true like the slippery slope argument. You can see, and that's also what you said, it starts with medical causes, medication, and then you also use this medical mongering example. So I think what we can see is that very slowly, those who have experienced or witnessed this development, they saw it was a development, and they can explain this development. And for people in the younger generation, it's not, they don't see the development, they just see that it's there, and they don't question it anymore. So therefore, and particularly with social freezing, I think there are differences in the perception of social freezing between the older generation and the younger generation of women. Whereas the older generation of feminists, in general, are more critical about it because of the neoliberal argument. I think younger women tend to accept it more. So I think because there is this, and you had this wonderful slide there, somebody, that our norms are created by communities. So since there are these bubbles and in-groups which create these norms, it's kind of have this discussion across these bubbles and across these generational clusters, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe Lucy or Marlene, could you reply on the question, the first one of him? The technology-driven question.
I think you're super pro it.
Yeah, but
should we just give women an extra 10 years?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because I was listening to Erich so intensely that I just forgot the question. I'm so sorry. Yes. So in my opinion, we should give young women the opportunity of having an extra 10 years, because I believe that young women are intelligent enough to make their own decisions on this topic.
But
and I think they should be just allowed to.
But egg freezing, then, or what's
yes, because I think, I mean, the downside of egg freezing is always that the companies will come in and will pay for it and will pressure it on young women, which is absolutely nothing that I would support, because I mentioned before that I worked in the USA. Of course, you're absolutely right. In the USA, as a young woman, you're working for big companies, you're forced to, or kind of forced to do egg freezing, because they give it to you as a perk, like an extra week of holiday. Do you want the extra week of holiday, or do you want the egg freezing, like that? And it's a little bit of a pressure, because if you don't do it and your colleague does it, who is gonna be achieving a better position? of course, your colleague, because she doesn't want to have children until she's 45, and she's the one we can have the workforce from, and you're going to be out for, I don't know, I mean, Americans are all out for 4 weeks when they give birth maximum, so that's not even something we can discuss here. I mean, that's ridiculous, but in our country, if we focus it on Austria, then it's just, we should be able to decide what to do with our futures and what to do with our fertility. And I know there is a system aspect, and I know there are structural aspects and everything, but system will not change for us. So
also, if I can just add, it is possible to offer egg freezing care that's not financialized, and that's not necessarily for profit, and that's not necessarily marketed in those particular ways. There's very many precedents of egg freezing being integrated into public health systems that do not put those kinds of pressures on women, and that do offer very intensive education before the treatment that highlight the risks. So that doesn't take away all of the issues. It doesn't mean that there aren't other influences on women outside of the clinic, but it doesn't mean that it's either the sort of hyper-commercialized American model or a restrictive model in which the option is not available at all through intervention of the state. Yeah. So, you know, trying to think about what would be a liberatory or at least an acceptable form of reproductive health care, including those options that are available now, would be an alternative.
But sorry, what's the success rate of egg freezing currently?
It depends on how you rate success. Well, if you say, in reproductive medicine, we're always rating success as having a child. But you cannot really rate this because not every egg cell that is frozen is collected. So a lot of frozen eggs are not even collected because the woman conceives by herself when she's, for example, 40 or 41, and then she will not collect her egg cells. So we cannot really say if is that a case that is a successful case of egg freezing, or is that a case that it's just a normal pregnancy and her.
But of those which are collected, I mean, which you try.
They do not collect them because they don't need them.
What is the success rate of those who are collected?
Also, it depends when you freeze them. When you freeze them at 25, for example, and you have good sperm and you get out a lot of blastocysts, then very, very good. If you freeze them at 34 and the sperm is not optimal sperm, then lower. So it depends on the patient. That's why fertility counseling is so just a difficult thing, because you have to calculate for every patient, for every couple.
Okay, but so what I'm not an expert on this, but the numbers I saw is that the minority who try to collect their eggs get a live child out of it. I understand it depends on many things, but I come back to would I like to give women 10 more years? Sure, absolutely, if I could safely. Am I under do I think egg freezing is giving them 10 more years? No, I don't. And to your really interesting question, I wish we could study this. If we had a easy way to extend ovarian aging, slow it down, and we would get 5 more years, either, oh yes, now everything would be fine. We would have the education, the perfect partner, the apartment, traveling, and then the child, and voila. Or we would see other life goals creeping up, and we would still be, I need to do this and this and this and this, and people would still postpone. And I can't tell which future we would have, but that's the other thing, and maybe I would vote for the second, that there are always other things which you can do because you don't know how your life will be as a parent, and it's such a big leap, and you are finding reasons to postpone.
Jacky wanted to add another question.
It's not a question, it's just a brief comment that we know that the people who went to fertility assessment clinics, when they had the all clear that they didn't have a fertility problem as far as they could tell at the moment, people did do exactly that. They didn't rush home and have their babies. They just postponed for several more years after. So I think for me, the extra 10 years is one, are you actually getting the extra 10 years? Because as you saw from the description, there is still a lot of uncertainty. So in a way, you want the extra 10 years to have a better chance of achieving your goals, but maybe you don't get to achieve your goals anyways because the option is associated with still a lot of uncertainty. So it doesn't solve the problem of uncertainty, I think, in the long run.
Please, just a last remark, because we have one last question from the first row. But Marlene, if you want to add something?
You never have, that's the downside of medicine. You never have a guarantee. You can just never say 100%. That's what I have to tell my patients every day. But if you are below 30 and you freeze above 15 egg cells, you have a very good chance that that you will have fertility afterwards, so you will get pregnant afterwards. But of course, we cannot like check the quality of those eggs before we freeze them, so we don't know which kind of eggs you have frozen. I'm absolutely right there with you. But still, I think if you freeze, not only I think, but science does, if you freeze at 25, you have a better genetic quality than you have at 35. That's just facts.
Erich, do you want to add something, or can we take the next?
Yeah, only, I mean, public money, and particularly for health services, is not infinite. So it's also a question of prioritizing. Do we really want to put money into this instead of because you suggested it.
No, I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to do that 25.
And maybe we could find low technology solution or social solutions in order to give this extra 10 years, maybe earlier, not later.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's so many people.
Yeah. She had her hand raised her hand.
Thank you very much for these comments that are really enlightening. I want to make a brief comment also. When I joined this roundtable about technology and fertility, I've been in my mind pop up how other technologies during the time affected the fertility. And I would like just to get you through one of the first technology that affected fertility. Maybe it's not a very intuitive association, but please think at the end of 1800, it was the discovery of steam engine, which make possible that human society pass from the agricultural to more industrialization. So industrialization means that using the steam engines, factories were built, and primitive robots that are industrial production machines replaced man work. So heavy work took over by machines. That means that in the factories, heavy work could be now performed not only by men, but also by women. It means that women start slowly to change their traditional role to stay home and make dinner and clean and babysit the kids. They start to work in factories in the same way as men did it. Working in factories give women financial independence, and that was one of the main steps that switch the relationship between women and men and start to transform the role of women and men in the family. Once women start to become financial independent, the relation between gender starts slowly to switch. women want to get...
I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to shorten your question a bit. What is the question you have?
It's just a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, the comment is that there are other technologies like steam engine, and then in 1960 the contraceptive pills that affected fertility. And you see there are some technologies that affect this issue without even thinking about. When we first discovered them, we didn't think that they will affect this in this way the fertility. So the question and the comments that were made, how technology will further affect fertility, like egg freezing, artificial womb, gene selection, I think only time could answer to this question. I mean, for now, we can only speculate and express our opinion, but only time will tell how the human relations will evolve with all these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this question because we have to, I have to look at the time already, to the final round, and I would like to ask you, as the first day of the conference comes to an end, I would ask every one of you what you take with you from this conference, from this first conference day and this roundtable now. A new idea or a new whatever, a thought. Anna, I would like to start with you.
Oh, I'm just really inspired. Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking what we discussed with Eva which her research shows that, I mean, there somehow in the 35+ fertility we appear to have hit a wall. It's not increasing, at least in European countries anymore, and that's all the time in my head now. That why is that a biological limit, a social limit? Why? I mean, despite all these advances in fertility treatment, 35+ women are, on the population level, not having more children now, and this stagnation has been going on for 10 years. So what is causing kind of the end? Is this the end of postponement? Yeah, I hope not, but...
Okay, thank you. Jacky, I would like to continue with you.
I was already synthesizing earlier in the day, thinking, wow, you know, it feels to me like listening to all the different talks, that one of the things I notice is how much adaptation there is. So when you're looking at the work environment, people are adapting their work patterns. When we looked at education, they were shifting this. There's a lot of shifting and adjustment that people are trying to make to accommodate their parenthood goals in the kind of lives that they have. And so it made me realize that I had to go and study a little bit more the concept of how people are trying to adapt and evolve in a way, because that is what reproduction is about, right? Finding a way to reproduce despite the circumstances that you're in. So I think humans are just demonstrating what they do, which is evolve.
Thank you. Erich.
I was not worried when I entered this stage, but I'm now worried.
But you said we should worry more.
I think we should worry even more. Yeah, I think if it would be so simple that everybody takes his or her decision and then everything is fine, that's not the case. I mean, look at climate change. Everybody takes his or her decision, which is well-founded, and if we are in a big mess and we don't know how to get out of it. And I'm worried because we always take decisions which are well-founded because we want to heal something, we want to improve something, and in the end we created the next problem and we don't know how to get out of it. And I started with that, we don't know even how to talk about it without getting on each other's throats. Mm. That's a problem.
Thank you very much. Lucy.
Yeah, I am... Gosh, there's been so many interesting topics and so many beautiful presentations, so thank all of you for doing that. I find that on the top of my head at this moment is Jacky's suggestion of danger control, which I think is such an interesting way of framing people's motivations, because we often talk about anxiety, or we talk about ambivalence, or we also talk about goals. But I think the extent to which we frame questions of reproduction and fertility in relation to something that feels like danger, and the way in which we then try to control that danger, whether by avoiding it, or by doing it, or by going to technologies, or I feel like it's such a potent framing. Danger control is what is at the front of my mind at the moment.
Danger control, okay. Marlene, I would like to give you the last word.
Yeah. I'm sorry I apparently put so much concern on Erich. Okay, I'm glad. But yeah, I'm also inspired by my co-panelists and all these thoughts about structures and system and everything. But I think I will continue still advocating for patients and their choices, and that we hopefully have the chance in the future to have social freezing in Austria too, because as long as system and careers will not pause for 1.5 years and say, okay, you make your 1.5 years, you make your baby, and then you come back and you have the same chances and the same positions and everything. I think we will just have to do it, and system will not change for us. So that's...
Thank you very much. Thank you all that you came to Vienna, that you participated in this talk. Thank you all that you stayed here and listened to us. We also especially thank the team around Eva Bourgeois and Thomas Sobotka, Christina Suero and Dilek Gilditz from the Wittgenstein Centre for Demography and Global Human Capital, and all the institutions and departments that worked with them. Just a quick reminder, tomorrow Jacky, Anna and Lucy will be continuing the discussions here on the stage, so you should not miss that. And now I think it's even more time to have some discussions.
I want to say one more thing, just that I feel like I don't want to end with saying systems won't change for us. I feel like it's really important. We are here together. We are all people with really influential voices. All of us in this room have incredible privilege and influence. So we should change the systems as far as we can. And we have to do what we can. I know it's not a starting point to say like, okay, we're just going to do that first and not do anything else. But systems will change with us, and we need to do it.
We are the systems, or you are, yeah, the system. And I'm very glad that there is even more time for discussion tonight and tomorrow. Hope we see you all tomorrow again. Thank you for coming and have a nice evening.